Hello class. I have my paper on the American Red Cross in Charlotte during World War I. Using a variety of sources including first-hand accounts, newspapers, books written at the time and after, and several other sources, I argue that the American Red Cross played a large role in Charlotte during World War I. And just before the U.S. entered the war, the Red Cross opened hundreds of new chapters across the nation in anticipation of the extra support needed for the American military in the war. The Charlotte chapter opened just 3 days before America's official entrance into the war to an enthusiastic audience that cheered and celebrated the newly founded chapter as a way that they could contribute to the war effort in America. Now, the Red Cross used bulletins and speeches to garner even more support from the community than it already had. By passing out bulletins about conservationism and what people could do in their own homes, the American Red Cross built a relationship for the people in the community to feel patriotic in their contributions to the war. Speeches were also given at mostly all-female groups and colleges in order to gain volunteers for the nursing community and workrooms around Charlotte. Now, the workrooms that opened in Charlotte happened just a month after the Charlotte chapter opened and were filled to the brim with volunteers willing to make surgical dressings and bandages to be used at Camp Green and in the war in Europe. Newspapers also played a great role because if people weren't at the initial openings or didn't see these bulletins, they relied on newspapers to get their information at the time. Now, the newspapers put articles out that showed drastic support for the Red Cross in Charlotte to garner even more volunteers and use words like patriotic and truly American to emphasize that people who did not support the Red Cross were not truly Americans or good Americans. Now, the Red Cross also had several workers that worked at Camp Green in support, giving meals to the troops, offering medical aid as nurses, and just producing bandages, socks, all kinds of material needed at the camp. Susan Hicks worked both at Camp Green and at the Red Cross in Charlotte, like many nurses of the time did. They would go back and forth between the Red Cross and Camp Green as needed. Now, she gives a first-hand account that describes that not only was Red Cross providing bandages, raising money, they also acted as a liaison between the military and their families and the actual soldiers. Now, she talks about how the Red Cross offered donations to families in need and helped support families by getting the pay of soldiers that sometimes had problems in the military. Outside the aid that is provided to the families, they also ran canteens in the Red Cross throughout the country. Now, Charlotte and Fayetteville both had canteens on railway stations that offered meals to soldiers going in and out of Camp Green and Camp Bragg. Now, the U.S. government asked the Red Cross to do this because with so many extra soldiers going into the military at such a short amount of time, it was often hard for the soldiers to get a proper meal throughout their trips across the country and in and out of camps. So through all of this, I believe the Red Cross played a significant role from feeding the soldiers, treating their wounded, raising money, producing and needed goods for the war, as well as many other functions. Looking at how the Red Cross in North Carolina, and Charlotte in particular, worked and gained support from the community, it's easy to see that the people really embraced the Red Cross chapter here in Charlotte. Now, that's even more evident because Charlotte is still the main chapter of the Red Cross in Western North Carolina, in charge of over 53% of the population. From the opening events from 1917 till the end of the war, there were no shortages of volunteers in North Carolina, and they never had a problem raising money or getting the volunteers to workrooms or hospitals, nurses training, any of those problems. And it's very easy to see from all these things that they did that the Red Cross played a very large role in the lives of the Charlotte people and the people at Camp Green. even if it's not always written about in books or studied, it's easy to see that these people really needed each other and worked together in harmony. Thank you.